Have you ever struggled with doubts about your practice? Doubt is a normal part of the path, but if we're not careful, it can derail us. In this video, what I want to do is to look at doubt. Notice that it's not simply something that occurs to beginners, but even the Buddha himself, as we're going to see, had doubts at times, and learned to overcome them. If it's addressed skillfully, doubt can become a teacher rather than a hindrance. So in this video, what I want to do is to explore what the Buddha taught about doubt and how we can work with it so that we can turn it into a stepping stone rather than an obstacle. First, I want to touch on the nature of doubt in early Buddhism. In early Buddhism, doubt was seen as one of the 5 hindrances to meditation, to success in meditation. It got in the way. In a couple of early suttas, it's analogized to a forked path. That is to say, a forked path between the right Eightfold Path and the wrong Eightfold Path. And doubt makes us unsure as to which of these 2 forks we should take. Similarly, in another early sutta, the doubt is analogized to a bowl of water in the darkness. The Buddha says, "Suppose there was a bowl of water that was cloudy, murky, and muddy, hidden in the darkness. Even a person with clear eyes checking their own reflection wouldn't truly know it or see it. In the same way, there's a time when your heart is overcome and mired in doubt, and you don't truly understand the escape from doubt that has arisen. At that time, you don't truly know or see what's good for yourself, good for another, or good for both. Even hymns that are long practiced don't spring to mind, let alone those that are not practiced." So again, the feeling here is of being lost, of being unable to find the right path. Now, doubt can take various forms. There's doubt in the Buddha's teachings, let's say. There's doubt in our own abilities, our own competency. And there's doubt in the path, in the practice in various ways, that we don't really understand it or know it or how to do it properly. Doubt can feel like a kind of inner tension, where we're sort of spinning in circles, unable to decide whether we should move forward or turn back. Now, some of these doubts can be constructive or at least unproblematic, while others can really stop us entirely, and they are the true hindrances. In a constructive sense, we may use doubt to help kindle our own sense of interest and curiosity. We might ask, how can I test this in my own experience? If the Buddha makes a claim or we hear something recommended to us as a practice, we might consider how we can see if that practice is good for us by trying it ourselves. Problematic doubt, however, can paralyze the mind with endless questions or even a kind of fear response, and can lead to avoiding practice altogether or to a kind of dead-end cynicism. Second, I want to turn to some of the Buddha's advice on overcoming doubt, on helping us to overcome our doubts. Now, to be clear, for the Buddha, doubt itself wasn't necessarily a problem. That is to say, the teachings, the Buddha's claims, were to be tested in our own experience and verified for ourselves. We were not supposed to take these simply on the Buddha's word. Perhaps the most famous place this is made clear is in a sutta called the Sutta to the Kalamas. In this sutta, the Buddha is addressing a group of lay people who live in a village at a sort of a crossroads where there appear many holy people teaching their own kind of dharmas. And as a result, these people, these kalamas, are confused. They don't know what to believe. They have all kinds of doubts because every time a holy person goes through the town, every time a thinker, a philosopher goes through the town, they're given a different perspective on the world. So they don't know what to believe. The Buddha gives them a discourse on what we might term epistemology, that is, how we know about the world. I did a video on that epistemology. I'll leave a link to that video down below in the notes if you haven't seen it or would like to hear more about what the Buddha had to say. But in a nutshell, the Buddha's famous claim was this. He said, "Please, Kalamas, don't go by oral transmission, don't go by lineage, don't go by testament, don't go by canonical authority, don't simply rely on logic, Don't rely on inference or by reasoned train of thought. Don't go by the acceptance of a view after deliberation. Don't go by the appearance of competence. And don't think the ascetic is our respected teacher, and so therefore we should believe it. But when you know for yourselves these things are skillful, blameless, praised by sensible people, and when you undertake them, they lead to welfare and happiness, then you should acquire them and keep them. The critical point here that the Buddha is making is that you're supposed to test for yourself that the teachings are skillful and worthwhile, rather than taking that claim on somebody else's authority. In that way, we can cultivate this kind of internal confidence in the path, rather than simply following somebody else's lead. For example, we may feel the ease that releasing a kind of identification or a kind of clinging brings, that when we release that clinging, we feel ease. And that ease, that happiness, that good feeling that we get from that ease, gives us confidence that we're doing the right thing. Similarly, in meditation perhaps, we may encounter a sort of a peace or a feeling of freedom that we lack in ordinary life, and that feeling of freedom or peace, again, may give us confidence that we're doing the right thing, we're headed in the right direction. Key to this development of confidence is investigation. In fact, investigation is the second of the factors of awakening, these factors that we try to develop in ourselves that lead to enlightenment or awakening. It's the second one after mindfulness itself, which is to say that when we sit down in mindfulness meditation, what we want to develop here is a kind of an open curiosity that makes us look at the world, look at what's arising and passing in front of us. Try to find these connections, these causal connections that appear and disappear and that make themselves known regularly. This open curiosity that we're trying to develop leads to investigation. That is this investigation we're talking about, that then helps us to understand the way that the world works, helps us to overcome our doubts. Building this kind of confidence takes time. It's not an easy process, but it's like sort of following a dim light in the darkness. We can sort of see it ahead of us and we're following it along, and as we see it, we get closer to it. We can also consider, well, I should say, when we're doing our practice, we should try to think of ways that we can develop this inner confidence. How can we test the teachings? How can we see that this is working? Now, of course, none of this is going to happen quickly. It's going to take time, but we want to keep that in mind. Another way that we can help develop confidence and overcome doubts is through what are known as spiritual friends, or kalyana mittas in the language of Pali. These are friends who perhaps are a little farther along the path than we are. They can help clear up some of our doubts by explaining things to us or pointing us in a better direction. Third, I want to touch on a couple of examples of overcoming doubts in the early texts. The first of these has to do with Sariputta, the Buddha's right-hand disciple, known as the greatest in wisdom of his disciples. Sariputta began, before he was a disciple of the Buddha, as a disciple of a different teacher named Sanjaya Belatiputta. Sanjaya was what we might term an arch-doubter, someone who refused to entertain any positive beliefs, but claimed to doubt everything. The Buddha would derisively call Sanjaya an eel wriggler, because he would always try to wriggle himself out of any positive claim that was attached to him. And Sariputta's example, or the example of how he learned to overcome this with the Buddha's teachings, shows some of the instability of this kind of complete doubt and how the Buddha worked with it. In this story, Sariputta is standing behind the Buddha and fanning him as the Buddha talks to a wanderer who's come by named Diganaka. Diganaka appears to be a follower of Sanjaya, since he espouses a similar attitude, as he says, "Mr. Gautama, this is my doctrine and view. Nothing is acceptable to me." The Buddha then responds to Diganaka saying, "This view of yours, is that acceptable to you? And Diganaka blusters for a bit and basically says that it doesn't matter. With this response, the Buddha then gives a sort of a mini discourse on clinging to views. Basically what the Buddha says is it's one thing to give up all views, to claim that you don't have any views, but if that position, if that viewpoint, if you like, causes you to get into arguments and disputes with other people and fight with them and become angry at them and get them angry at you, then this viewpoint of yours is not very useful. As the Buddha says, a sensible person reflects like this, considering in themselves the potential for arguing, quarreling, distress, and harm. They give up that view by not grasping another view. That's how those views are given up and let go. In other words, the sensible approach to epistemology, according to the Buddha here, is not one of, we might say, dogmatic skepticism, of loudly disagreeing with or loudly saying that we do not accept any view that is presented to us. Rather, the sensible way forward is a kind of an emotional revolution, by not clinging to, not identifying with any views or beliefs themselves. The Buddha's argument here seems to have struck home with Sariputta because he became enlightened upon hearing it. Apparently, we can read into it here that he was beginning to understand or understood this key difference between doubt on the one hand and true wisdom on the other. Another example of overcoming doubt involves the Buddha's own journey. It seems that after the Buddha attained enlightenment, he went through a period of doubts. As the Buddha says, "I've struggled hard to realize this, enough with trying to explain it. Those mired in greed and hate can't really understand this teaching. It goes against the stream, subtle, deep, obscure, and very fine. Those besotted by greed cannot see, for they're shrouded in a mass of darkness. So, as I reflected like this, my mind inclined to remaining passive, not to teaching the Dharma." In other words, the Buddha had grave doubts about his own ability to teach this obscure and difficult Dharma, since, as he says later on, craving and clinging are loved by so many people. They love it so much that they're not going to want to give it up. Now, this example, I think, shows the universality of doubt, in the sense that even the Buddha himself, after attaining enlightenment, had doubts of a kind, at least for a time. And again, at least in this particular tradition. And the Buddha overcame these doubts through compassion, through a growing understanding of the importance of helping along those few people who were able to understand and see what he was teaching. In both of these cases, the case of Sariputta as well as the case of the Buddha, their doubts seem to have been overcome by kinds of emotional revolutions rather than cognitive ones or epistemic ones. That is to say, they overcame these doubts not by learning new things, but by emotionally rewiring or re-understanding the world from a different emotional perspective. On the one hand, the wisdom to cease clinging to views and opinions, and on the other, the compassion to see the importance of helping those who are suffering. In conclusion, doubt can be a great teacher to us. If not dealt with skillfully, doubt can indeed become a hindrance to our progress along the path. It can derail us. However, if we're willing to work with doubt, then we can come to a position where we truly have confidence in what we're doing. The opposite of doubt is not blind faith in something unseen or unknown. Rather, it's this, as I say, confidence in the rightness of what we're doing. Confidence based on interest, in investigation, in curiosity, in looking to what really works, based on compassion for ourselves and for other beings, compassion that makes us want to discover the best ways forward to help people who are suffering. The Buddha taught that we overcome doubt through experience, through investigation, and through the help of spiritual friends who can help point us the right direction. Observing our doubts mindfully and investigating them carefully can help us overcome them in time. Seen in this way, doubt is not a failure, but rather a powerful tool for growth and insight. So my question for you is, what doubts have you experienced in your practice, and how have you worked to overcome them? What has worked for you? If you would like to hear more also about Sariputta's own journey, I have a video about that, and I'll leave it up here on the screen if you haven't seen it or would like to see it again. If you're getting something out of these videos of mine, consider taking a look at my Patreon page, which is linked up here on the screen or down below in the notes, and see if you want to help support the channel and the work that I'm doing here. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the next one. And meanwhile, all of you, be well.